Welcome back to Behind the Bima. We are super excited to welcome you to our new studio. And I can't think of a more chashuv a guest to welcome to launch our new season from our new studio than our dear friend Rabbi Daniel Glatstein. Thank you so much for being with us, making this part of your schedule on your visit.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Rabbi Glatstein, I'm considered someone who's pretty busy, and I'm proud of what I do. But I look at you, and I see Torah Anytime, almost 13,000 shiurim, Svarim, Hebrew and English, a Rav of a Shul, leading tours of trips around the world. And I say, I don't know how it's possible. I don't know how you're getting it all done. So really, this is a conversation. It's behind the bima, but really it's like an intervention for me. I want to learn from you. Did you study time management strategies and skills? Did you just pick them up? Do you have all kinds of hacks and shortcuts? How are you possibly getting that all done?
I think, our sages teach kol ha-poisel b'mumai poisel. I think takes one to know one. I'm going to throw this one back at you. I mean, it is my first time here in BRS, and it's not a shul, it's not a center, it's an empire of Torah, tefillah. So you tell me how this has been created.
Okay, I'll tell you my tips after, but how do you balance it all? Are you rigidly planned and scheduled and prepared? Have you mastered the art of saying no? When do you say yes? When do you say no? What are some of the tips and tools that you've used to get to this point?
I'm very humble that the answer is negative to all the above. I have to figure out how to say no. I have to learn a little time management. I wish I would make use of my time better. Try to do as much as we can.
Is it siyata d'shmaya?
Everyone needs siyata d'shmaya, yeah.
Everyone and everything. So tell us a little bit more about Rabbi Daniel Glatstein. There are 13,000 shiurim online. The Torah is accessible, available. Obviously, it's hitting deep. It resonates with people. That's why it's so popular. But tell us about yourself, your background, where you grew up. Did you, when you were a little boy, picture, I want to be teaching on Torah anytime. I want so many people clicking and watching and learning with me. I doubt that at your bar mitzvah they gave you that bracha. So tell us about your background, your childhood, and how you got from there to here.
Okay. These questions are very difficult for me to answer. I'll tell you personally, people think, I have a lot of shiurim online, and maybe I'm out there a little bit, and they think I'm a very public person. I'm naturally shy. I'm naturally, I like personal time. I like private time. I don't enjoy the attention. Let me tell you about my background, and then maybe you'll get a little bit of an insight into where I come from. So I always start with my grandfather. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. He passed away a few years ago at 106 years old.
Wow.
He was maybe one of the last Talmidim of Rabbi Nachum Zemba. He was a ben bayis by Rabbi Nachum Zemba. He had smicha from pre-war Gedolim, names that are almost unknown today. Reb Shlomo David Kahana. You could look in the Igros Moshe, and Reb Shlomo David Kahana is called Avi Ho'agunos, the father of all the women who were of uncertain status after the Holocaust. They didn't know what happened to their husbands. So he was the one who was mater all the agunos. He was a fascinating personality. He was of Lithuanian descent, and he was the chief rabbi of Warsaw, which is a very complex situation. Warsaw is the seat of Ger Chasidus. To bring in someone from Lita would not be a natural fit, but he was such a gaon that he led, and can I use these words?
Sure.
He was such a brilliant Torah scholar that he was able to be the leader of Polish Hasidus, Lamdus in Poland, and he was also the Rosh Yeshiva of Tach Gamoni, which was somewhat of a university that coupled secular studies with Hebrew studies.
When did he pass away?
About 50 years ago.
Okay.
He's buried in the Sanhedria cemetery where
you didn't know him?
I didn't know him personally. But, I saw my grandfather. My grandfather took me back many, many generations. I saw a man who saw Imre Yemes. I saw somebody who, his grandfather was the Rav in Linschitz in the 1860s when the Malbim was one of the greatest of all the Achronim, one of the later sages. The Malbim had one of the most rocky rabbinic careers of any rabbi in history. He literally went from one rabbinic post to the next. I don't know if he stayed in one place for too long. His life was in peril from his tzibor, from his kehila, from reform. And at one point of time in the 1860s, he sat in a shul in Linschitz, where my great-great-grandfather was the rabbi, and he was friends with the Malbim. So my grandfather, I'm looking at him, he grew up hearing firsthand about the Malbim. You know, the Malbim, the Briskers say, there are three achronim that have a status of a Rishon. They say, of course, Reb Chaim Brisker, the Vilna Gaon, and the Malbim. So, you know, my grandfather brought me to a different world, a world that nobody had any exposures, nobody knows anything about. And, you know, he was the Ger Chassid, but he didn't take that with him after the war. He was a rabbi in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for 70 years. He was a very compassionate and kind-hearted and generous person. He was one of the most sensitive souls that anyone has ever met. He was a very big tzaddik. He had tremendous inner gevura. He had miraculous salvation from the Holocaust. And my grandmother was the daughter of the last Rav of Sachachav. So he was a student of the Shem Shmuel. And the name of this Rav was Rabbi Yehuda Leib Volman. He was an up-and-coming young Rav in Poland. He had association with Rameir Shapiro. He had a chavrusa shaft with a big makubal named the Tzaddik of Ranana. And he was an up-and-coming, budding Gadol B'Yisrael. At one point of time, he could have saved his life by coming to America, where the Aguda was going to carve out a position for him, chief rabbi of America. And he gave up his life al Kiddush Hashem in the Warsaw Ghetto.
Now, I notice, Rabbi Glatstein, that when you talk about yourself, you're very shy and slow and hesitant and soft-spoken. And when you talk about other people, you light up and you know their biography. No. But these other people clearly impacted your life too.
This is
you
me.
Drew from them, and that is you. What you're describing about where you come from is also somewhat autobiographical too, trying to take the best of those.
I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a picture. So, you know, I grew up hearing about the Rav of Sachachav, and he gave up his life, al Kiddush Hashem, because he says it's not right for him to leave his kehila. I have a lot of other influences in my family background. One that I think is a particular interest in regarding rabbinics. Okay, my mother's grandfather. Okay, his name was Shlomo Zalman Glick. He came from a very different background. He came from a rabbinic family in Poland. I believe the Haskalah started making inroads in the family, so he had older brothers that... Now, when I say Haskalah, it doesn't necessarily mean leaving observance, but a little bit of a different approach to the outside world. And he decided on his own, he got in his head he's going to come to America, maybe in the late 20s and the early 30s. I don't remember. I'm not sure. And when he came to America, he had not chartered his course for his life. He didn't know where he was headed. On the boat, people would tell him, you know, what do you have, tefillin? No, you don't wear tefillin in America. People were throwing the tefillin overboard. So he decided, he was very stubborn, and he said, you know, you don't tell me what I should do. I'm going to wear my tefillin. And he was self-educated. He taught himself to learn Mishnah Berurah. So he didn't know any chachmas. He didn't know, you know, these halachas, you know, are not meant to be kept. These halachas are meant. He didn't believe in cultural Judaism. He believed in doing what you're supposed to do. So he came across a halacha that you're not allowed to speak by davening. And if you speak by davening, gadol avoyna min asai, goyerin by. So he doesn't know any chachmas. So in the 1930s in America, when it was literally unheard of, the concept of not talking by davening, he went around telling people straight,
right,
either stop or leave.
Right.
And many Rabbanim, if not most, didn't like that. So he wasn't able to stay there. And finally, he went to a Rav Hillel David. Maybe you heard of the name Rav Hillel David. And Rav Hillel David said, you know, you're right. You know, I have nothing to say about that. So he started a revolution in Flatbush of Kavarat Tefillah. And until today, in that shul, you literally could hear a pin drop by the davening. So I'm growing up, I know Zaidi Zalman, he was Mussar Nefesh to create this revolution, which was not popular, but made very strong inroads, at least in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So these are some of the influences. And if I could add, my father is a trial attorney, so he was not in the rabbinate. He said his father was in the rabbinate, his son is in the rabbinate, but he's an extremely talented speaker. He's a world-class speaker. And one time, Eish HaTorah came to our shul. Long story short, my father became a volunteer lecturer for Eish HaTorah Discovery. So growing up, he spoke in all the college campuses in America doing the Discovery program. So I grew up seeing firsthand the power of Torah to transform people, in a very dramatic way.
So I want to pick up on that because you self-describe yourself as a humble person, and yet at some point it must have clicked in your mind.
No, I don't describe myself as that. But, okay.
Shy.
Yeah.
And you are a humble person. That comes across very clearly. At what point, though, that clicked, and you said to yourself, despite my shyness, despite obviously a humility, you said, my mission, there's a purpose, I have to be Marbitz Torah. So many other people make the opposite decision. They say, who am I? Okay, so I have this lineage, I'll learn in the base medrash, but it's easier for me to sit in a corner, I don't want to get involved, politics, community, who am I to get up and give shiurim and record them? And what allowed that to click in your mind? What allowed you to make that change that says, I have an achrayus? In other words, I have a Masorah, I have an ability, I have a gift from Hashem, and therefore I have to use it to be Marbitz Torah for Klal Yisrael. How did you break through a barrier that so many other people are not able to break through?
Okay. I don't think it's my lineage that I said, my grandfather's grandfather knew the Malbim, therefore I have responsibility. No. It's an inner calling. It's, it's L'cha Amar Libi. Something in my soul says, this is my calling in life. This is my mission in life. And through that, I discovered ability that maybe I didn't even know or realize that I had.
So where did that start? Walk us through. Did you give a Dvar Torah when you were 10 years old and you realized I can do this? When did you realize that I have some talent or skill?
It took many years. When I was maybe 20 years old, I had an opportunity to give a shiur on Shavuos night. I literally prepared for that shiur for, 6 weeks to give an hour shiur. And it was grueling because to get up in front of a tzibur and to deliver is not my nature. I did it 1 year. I did it 2 years. I did it 3 years. Slowly, it became a little bit more natural to me. And then after I finished kollel, I was davening in a shul. And I saw this shul didn't have a rabbi. And after davening, people would just file out. People would file out. So I suggested, before people file out, somebody should say a Dvar Torah. So, the board voted. And after much deliberation, they came back that the board voted 9-8 that this is a good idea. No, that it's a good idea. And they said, but you need to do it. I said, no, I wasn't suggesting myself. They said, no, it's a good idea. Try it out. So I used to prepare maybe 3 hours for a 2-minute Dvar Torah, to really pack it in, to make it interesting, and then I did it daily, and then it became very natural, and people enjoyed it, and from there, I was recommended to give shiurim in the Young Israel of Kew Garden Hills and in other places, and then a rabbanus opened up right near my yeshiva, and that's where I started, and then, but still, I'll tell you where it really picked up. When, when the technology developed that you could put a shiur online, somebody once suggested to me, and I started in a shul in Queens. The name of the shul is Taras Emes. It was an big old pulpit synagogue. It was the first shul in Queens, and it was a little bit on the outskirts of the neighborhood. It was like a dying shul, and it was a starter job. Okay, so I was right out of kollel, and it was a very good opportunity. In New York, for every available job, there are 1,000 applicants.
Right.
So I fell into this job. and I was giving a weekly share, and somebody suggested, why don't you record the share? I said, record the share. I said, what am I going to do with it? So he said, you're going to post it. I said, where am I going to post it? He said, online.
What's online?
I said, online? I had never been on a computer in my entire life. I had not been on a computer, and I was 30 years old. I had not been on a computer. I even took computers in high school, but all we needed to do is memorize like 100 questions and answers. So I did it. There were 8 computers and there were 10 kids in the class. So I didn't have one.
Right.
I had not been on one. And he said, no, this is where it's at. You're going to post the shir and maybe 200 people could watch it. I said, 200 people? So he said, give it a try. I'll come, I'll record it, I'll post it, we'll see what happens. And I remember started posting the shiurim, and after, I don't know, a year or two, I was told that 1 week, a few hundred people watched the shir. I said, a few? How's that possible? There are a few. Who's watching the shir? And then I said, why don't I post other shiurim? Why just the once a week shir? And the more I posted and the feedback I got, and I realized, maybe there's something over here. Maybe there's something to it. And the feedback and the response really, fired me up that, this is compelling. People enjoy this. This is something that can make an impact.
Can I just pick up on one point you said, because I don't want to let it pass?
Yeah.
You said that when you gave the 2-minute shir, you prepared for hours and hours.
Yeah.
I think that's something, this is kind of addressed to both of you, because both of you are internet personalities. Talmidei Chachamim, B'nai Torah, but you're out there on the internet. And I think the assumption most people have is that you give a shir and you move on. I don't think most people understand the amount of preparation and work that goes into every shir that's given. And I didn't want to let that moment pass without, first of all, reflecting upon it and digging a little bit deeper. Do you still do that? Are you still preparing so much for every shir? Is it the pride that you take in the shir, the hasmada? What drives you to do that?
I don't have the luxury to do that anymore. I don't have the time to do that anymore. I wish I could, because I think that people recognize that if you put time into something, people appreciate it. People appreciate that you value their time, and that people know when you've said the idea and now you're just dancing around it and saying it from a different perspective because there are 10 minutes left. People want to know 8 minutes is 8 minutes, 10 minutes is 10 minutes, an hour is an hour. That if they're coming to an hour shir, they realize they could also learn on their own for an hour. But this hour shir, it's like they're learning for 10 hours because they know you put 10 hours into it. Now, I don't have the luxury to do that for every shir, or to continue to do that today, what I once was able to do when I started. But preparation is key. Preparation makes a very big difference.
Are you very punctual? Meaning if it's an hour, you end after an hour? Or do you say, but I still have 3 more points to make, or in my notes, I really want to get it across. It really wraps this up.
I'm not punctual.
You're not punctual.
No.
Once you're on the roll, you're on the roll.
I'm on it, yeah.
But the preparation is there, that the content is organized.
It depends. Let's say, Shabbos Haggadah or Shabbos Shuvah, then I like to keep it to the allotted time.
Yeah.
But
me too. Not exactly. Yeah. I'm actually punctual the whole year except Shabbos Shuvah and Shabbos Haggadah. But different styles.
Yeah.
You mentioned your yeshiva learning in Kahal. So you learned the Chofetz Chaim.
Yeah.
And clearly you're a product in many ways. I think sort of the Mussar that maybe not classic Mussar, maybe you're not even comfortable calling yourself a Baal Mussar, but that machshava, that depth, that character improvement, that emphasis on personal growth, how relatable what you speak about is, obviously resonates, and that's probably where it comes from. Would you describe yourself today as a member of the Chofetz Chaim community?
That is such a good question.
Well, I'll tell you why I ask, and I don't want it to be controversial.
No, it's not controversial, and I want to speak about that.
Baruch Hashem, and our community of Chofetz Chaim is very strong, and I'm super grateful. Our institutions, local yeshivas, many of the local rabbanim, and it's magnificent. These are colleagues, these are brothers, these are dear friends, these are people we look up to and we admire. One of the things that I've always not only admired, but even been a little bit envious of from my yeshiva and our background, is that a Chofetz Chaim guy knows exactly who our Rosh Yeshiva is, what we stand for, what their hope and expectation is of us, what our minhagim, what is our Masorah, what is our everything in a neat box. And in many ways, I don't say this to them, it maybe connects or parallels other movements within the frum world where people marry members of their same community and follow through and have this sense of mission of what they go out and do. And without criticism of where I come from, at our yeshiva, who shira you in will determine what your Mussar, what your minhag, what your Ashkafa, where you lit the menorah in the dorm. Everything, mamish, is like many yeshivas within one. And I've admired that even to the point of being envious of it. So that power is very strong and palpable here in our community, that usually if someone went to Chavetz Chaim, you know that, they bleed that, they wear it on their arm. It's who they marry, where they send their children, and what that is. That's the background to my question.
Okay. That question I'm excited to answer.
I was nervous. I was nervous to ask it.
No. I understand it could be very controversial, but I don't think it will be. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you straight. I'm gonna be very transparent about this. Many people listen to my shiurim are shocked that I went to Chavetz Chaim, and many people, when they find that I went to Chavetz Chaim, they say, "Now we understand." They're shocked, but yet they understand at the same time. So let me explain. I'm a very proud alumni of Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. I learned there for many years. I went to high school in Chavetz Chaim in Brooklyn. I was in Israel for a short stint. I was in the quote-unquote mothership for more years than anyone you know. And at the same time, I'm an extremely atypical alumni from Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. Because of my family background, because my grandfather knew Reb Menachem Zemba. The Chavetz Chaim system hadn't even been conceived yet, you know? So I feel I have a rich Mussar with or without Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. Number two, I have many personal influences outside of the yeshiva that I personally pursued while in Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, and I'm not sure they allowed me to. Maybe they're trying to wrap their mind around it exactly, but I'm very close with the Rosh Yeshiva. I think Rav Henoch Leibowitz was one of the Gedolei Marbitzei Torah of our generation, what he accomplished for Jewry in the United States of America. Rav David Harris, you will not find someone who is genuinely Amel B'Torah. Amel B'Torah, I mean just sweating to understand Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, like Rav David Harris, someone who has been working on his Midos, Ba'amelos, for decades and decades. But at the same time, for me personally, I also needed other role models and other Talmidei Chacham to look up to outside of the yeshiva system, maybe because of my background or because of my personality. So I like to think that my foundation is from the yeshiva, but I also have a lot of other influences and other maybe other parts of the building, other floors of the building besides the foundation on the first floor. For example, so when I started as a bacher, I used to sneak out of the yeshiva. Yeah, but this is not going to be too exciting though. I used to go to
behind the Bima moment.
Yeah, it's not as exciting as you think. I used to go to Rabbi Victor Miller. That was where it started.
That was the rebellious. That
was a rebellious streak. Because Rav Miller learned in Slabodka. See, here it is in Chavetz Chaim. They're telling me what Rav David said happened in Slabodka. So I said, let me see what happened in Slabodka. So I used to go to Rav Miller. I went there for 3 years. On Shabbos, I used to walk from Emun 31st to Essen Ocean Parkway next to the Mir Yeshiva. And I used to go to his Ashkafa shiurim. I used to ask him, I have a notebook of questions. I asked him, did they do this in Slabodka? Did they do that in Slabodka? So I always like to say, I used to ask him, because he was very into exercise. Rav Miller used to walk in his heyday an hour and a half a day. So I would ask him, should a yeshiva bacher do exercise? Yes. He should walk for 30 minutes a day. I said, did they do exercise in Slabodka? Yeah, they walked to a faraway dining room. But to me, it was, it was interesting. Let me hear from someone who was in Slabodka, how things went. Then a very big influence was after Rav Miller passed away and I was in Kollel, I stumbled across Rav Noach Isaac Goldbaum. So to me, what appealed to me was not the Chasidus, because people have different versions of what Chasidus is. My grandfather grew up in Warsaw. He knows what Chasidus is. He grew up knowing a lot of Gemara Baal Peh and Likutei Maran.
Right.
But he had an uncle in Warsaw who was like an Emistika Breslover Chassid. So what appealed to me about Rehoboam is he would say over Chassam Soifers, and he would say it over and bring alive different parts of the Chumash in a way that I had never been exposed to. So I got very drawn to Torah of the Chassam Sofer, Torah of the Noida Behuda, Torah of many Achronim that, let's say, in Yeshiva we're not typically exposed to. So now I got very into Sfarim. I want to learn all the Sfarim of all the different Achronim. And Rav Rehoboam would speak about their history and their background, and he would have a tish. But his tish wasn't, singing. There was a little bit of singing, but that wasn't the main thing. His tish was he would take a gadol and analyze their history and their background and the times they lived in and how it affected the Sfarim that they wrote. Now, this really appealed to me because, I think we spend so much time learning. You learn Rashi, you learn Tosfos. A typical yeshiva bachar, forget about a typical yeshiva bachar, a typical rabbi in America doesn't know who Rashi is, doesn't know who Tosfos is. And they could have learned for many, many years. People don't know the era that Tosfos lived in. People don't realize it happened during the times of the Crusades. Was Tosfos in jeopardy during the Crusades? Was his life in danger? What were the conditions that he wrote under? Who was Rabbeinu Tam? Everybody thinks the Rambam. The Rambam was the greatest of all the Rishonim. No, that's what Sfardim believe. Ashkenazim don't accept that. It's brought in many Shas Tshuva Sfarim that we hold Rabbeinu Tam was the greatest of all the Rishonim. But really, he was? What was so great about him? It was his approach to the Talmud. Rabbeinu Tam was a very wealthy man. Rabbeinu Tam owned real estate. He had vineyards. And you see Rabbeinu Tam throughout Shas, he has a certain attitude toward saving Jewish people money, And each Rishon has a unique history and a unique background, and each Acharon has a unique history and a unique background. So it's not history, it's Torah, it's learning.
And here was somebody who made you feel it's not Bittul Torah to know that or study that or appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, right. Not only is it not Bittul Torah, it's almost, maybe I'll talk about by the Oneg, but it's Bittul Torah the other way. You're lacking in your appreciation, understanding for Torah if you don't understand who these people were. I became fascinated with the life of the Chida. The Chida's life really resonates with me. And I just read the other day, maybe yesterday, the Chida wrote his first book at 16 years old. It's called Helem Davar, and he never published it, 150 mistakes that Achronim made because they weren't familiar with the background and the history of a particular gadol. Wow. But he never published it.
Now, was this all self-taught, or did you have places that you would look for this information? Did you just take out books and start reading about people, or were there online personalities?
I'm not a great expert, but Rabbi, this opened up my eyes to appreciate this miktsaya, this area of Torah knowledge. I would sometimes go to classes of Shneir Lyman. He was someone in our neighborhood. And this interested me a lot. And I think when a rabbi gives a shir and he brings in a Torah personality, teach the people who this personality was so that they have a greater appreciation for their Torah. If it's okay, I'll probably repeat it later. But, very often people say, oh, I heard this Dvar Torah. Okay, who said it? I don't remember. You don't remember, so then what are you telling me exactly? You're just saying an idea? I would like to know where this comes from. Chassam Sofer, where do you get the Chassam Sofer from? You saw on a Parsha sheet? Or do you know which Sefer the Chassam Sofer it is? Is it in Torah Moshe? Is it a Chassam Sofer al Torah? They were written at different times. Chassam Sofer wrote certain things when he was younger, when he was older. This is all part of it. A certain element of scholarship, of fullness of scholarship that I think enhances the learning.
And that's connected to the Torah itself, because the person is, we don't disconnect the information from the person. You're saying, so how could you know the information if you don't know the person who authored? Now, it's interesting, and I don't want to make this about your yeshiva, of course, which
I'll flesh that out. But yeah.
But are you, and I don't want to make it about them. I know that they're incredibly proud of you, but are you a success story of theirs? Meaning somebody whose Ashkafa ends up being, I'm very much connected to this, relate to this. I wrote an article about what I call the Shar HaKolol, right, the 13th gate to the Beis HaMikdash, if you didn't know the Shevet that you came from, and the Arizal's Nusach, and this idea of the people who say, I don't necessarily feel comfortable, don't lock me in a box, I'm not only in one place, there's a width and a breadth and a beauty to Torah, and I want to connect to it. I gave a talk in England a couple of years ago, and someone wrote me a beautiful email that one of the Rabbanim was there, who came from a yeshiva that also made him feel less than if he needed more, if he was curious, if he looked at, he had a home address of his Ashkafa, but also a passport to be able to travel and explore and see. And Baruch Hashem, after that, it opened up his eyes and it changed his life, and he started learning, and he became so. But I get some pushback for having that opinion. That's who I am too. And people are surprised sometimes, let's say where I went to yeshiva, given the breadth of what I like to quote and share, what speaks and resonates to me in the shiurim that I give. So have you received pushback for that? Does people say, if everyone's your Ashkafa, then you have no Ashkafa?
Okay,
or
so
why are you exploring or looking everywhere? Who are you? Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Hasidish, Litvish? What are you in the end?
I'm going to clarify. I'm going to continue to clarify. Because, yes, I enjoy the Chassam Sofer. I enjoy the Chida. I love Reb Chaim Falaji. I love many, many different Svarim and different influences. But at the same time, I will sometimes hear speakers or Rabbanim, and they say, you could say this, the Chidah says this, and the Chassam Sofer says this, and let's put it in the pot and mix it up together. No, you don't know what you're doing. Why, Because you're not grounded. You need to be firmly based with a foundation and a solid foundation. I would say that it has great value to have intellectual curiosity, to try to be familiar with different disciplines, different branches of knowledge, but that can't be your starting point. That can't be your foundation, because then your stability is in question. I think what I like about the yeshiva, you mentioned I went to Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, is that I feel the foundation is rock solid. The foundation is Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, applying yourself to understand the Talmudic process in an intellectually honest way. We're not trying to, say chidushim just for the sake of saying chidush, to really genuinely understand the Talmudic process, and complemented with knowledge of halacha and Mussar. And I know it's popular today, Mussar or Chasidus. I like Chasidus, but I personally think Chasidus is good, but you have to have Mussar. Because think about it. You have a choice. I could study my own psyche. Am I jealous? Am I arrogant? Am I working on my character? Or I could start thinking about the various olamais. Now, it's definitely more convenient and comfortable to think about the angels in heaven than to think about my own deficiencies. And it's definitely more glamorous to think about that. And it might excite the people more when I talk about Olam HaAtzilas and Olam HaAsiyah than if I talk about, Kina and Taiva and Gaiva. But who's gonna be more of a grounded and firmly based Jew, someone who spent years and years thinking about Chasidus, the extra pious practices, or Kabbalistic mysticism, which I love. I'll be the first to admit that. Or somebody who spent many, many years and decades working on their own character. So I think Chavetz Chaim, Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, is a very special yeshiva in terms of teaching young Jewish people the foundations of Torah Judaism.
To be clear, it could be any yeshiva. It wasn't about,
Yeah.
I'm speaking only because that's what you learned. But any yeshiva, that's your foundation. Their point is that at 17, 18, 19, you can't be, I'm everywhere, because then you're nowhere. You need a foundation, you need a home address, then you could travel. If you don't have a home address.
And I'm now I'm going to take the liberty. You said I'm very modest. Now I'm going to be not modest, okay? I'm not going to be not humble. I think, to a large degree, the appeal of the shiurim is that because I have the foundation of this yeshiva that I went to, and now I feel I apply that to the Chidah and the Chassam Sofer. And while if people in general hear, Rav Nachman of Breslov or other sources, they're trying to wrap their mind around that. It's not presented to them in a way that they feel it's based or grounded. But I think if you're grounded in the Talmudic process and halachic process, and you could show how these ideas emerge from authentic Judaism, then people are really then that really resonates with people.
In other words, the same critical analysis of a Rashi, and then I'm not moving on until I chap the Rashi. I'm not just dropping a chidah because I saw it quoted somewhere. I'm saying a chidah. Whatever I'm saying, I understand. I'm holding in.
To some extent.
Now, when you talk about being grounded, is there a limud to you that is Kodesh HaKodashim? In other words, with all your teaching, with all your preparing, is there a time during the day that you say, this is an hour that I'm taking for myself, for my own personal growth? It's not about what I'm going to give to others. It's about what I'm giving to myself. And what would that limud be?
What would it be, or what should it be?
I'll let you answer.
Yeah. There are a lot of things that I would like to be doing. For my own personal growth, I like to learn Chumash with Rashi. I find that by learning Chumash with Rashi, I always glean mine new insights from my one of my favorite pastimes is gleaning original insight from simple Chumash and Rashi. So
that's what you carve at the time. What do you get more of a geschmack from, speaking or writing? How many Sfarim? Since we're already on Not Humble, how many Sfarim are there currently? Is it like children? Are you allowed to say the number?
Sfarim? There
Sfarim, books,
Hashem,
English, Hebrew.
There are a number of them in Lashon HaKodesh and in English. Yeah.
Baruch Hashem. And
what do I get more?
So do you get, if you look at your schedule, you say, what am I doing tomorrow? If tomorrow is speaking day, tomorrow's a writing day, tomorrow's a learning day, which is the one that energizes you more?
Writing does not energize me. Because most of the writing process is tedious and grueling. Because I already know the idea. I said it. I gave it over. I created it. I gave it in a shir. I said it. Now it's a matter of crystallizing it in print. So, but I feel like it has to be done because if I don't do it, I'm not preserving it. So, do I get a chiyus out of writing? When I sat down and I wrote the idea originally, that gives me a chiyus. Or if I read it over a year or two later, I say it's a good thing I wrote it, otherwise I probably would have forgot it. That gives me a chiyus. But the actual writing is hard work.
You'd rather do the speaking. That energizes, that excites you more.
Easier.
Did all the writing begin as shiurim, and then you organized and took shiurim and converted them into? Is that generally the path of the writing?
Much of the written material came from the shiurim, but the consideration of what I choose to write is, did I create the material? In other words, if I just saw this Dvar Torah, I saw that Dvar Torah, and I gave it over in an interesting way, I don't feel like it's a contribution. But if, let's say, I strang together a few different Mara Makaimais, and by stringing it together, I feel I created a tapestry, right. And that tapestry presents like a new perspective on a subject.
There's a shtickle.
Yeah, but it has to be original. Right. Whatever the threshold original is, that's.
So not everything that you say do you write. That's the threshold for what you write. But most of the writing originated as a shir, as something that came together, Dvar Torah shir.
Yeah.
Now you've obviously traveled extensively. Open up Mishpacha magazine 5 times Jewish Times.
Yeah, but it's the same trip every week. It's not.
What do you find most enjoyable about those trips, and what trip has been the most impactful for you in terms of your own personal avodas Hashem, understanding of Judaism?
The most enjoyable part of a trip is preparing for it. If you don't prepare, it's not enjoyable for me. What's enjoyable? Sitting on the bus, seeing, it's not like it's graves, Now, people ask, why do you go to the grave? Do you feel you're going there because you need to get your tefillas answered? No, that's not. That might be a valid reason to go. And, I believe that it has value to daven at Kivrei Tzadikim. That's not the real reason I'm going. I'm spending my life dedicated to studying the texts written by these Gedolei Yisrael. I feel that by learning about their life and understanding the times they lived in, then their Torah to me is taken to a new level. So I need to go there. But going there is the motivation to prepare and to learn about them. So the enjoyment of the trip is commensurate with the preparation.
So where are some of the places that you've been, and where do you still yet hope to go? Meaning, do you have desire and craving to travel the world and travel to these
No, I don't have.
kfarim, or it's
No.
that there's tour operators there's people who want to learn. It's an excuse for you to prepare and teach.
No,
So it's like another venue to
it's yesh v'yesh.
transmit.
For the most part, this past trip excluded, I'm going to tell the trip organizer, listen, I want to go here. I want to go there. So let's make a trip around these areas. So for the most part, usually that's how it works. The most impactful trip was going to France when we went to the gravesite of Rashi, and then in Ramarup, Rabbeinu Tam, the Rashbam, the Rivam, because you grew up your whole life learning about the Balei HaTosfos, but until you actually spend time learning about their life, you realize, you don't know the first thing about them. You know that each Masechta had a different editor, a different Baal Tosfos who was the editor. And could you ask a contradiction between Tosfos in one place and another place? Not necessarily.
So, Rabbi Glatstein, you didn't go to university, you didn't go to graduate school, you didn't have somebody who's had to research papers and draw conclusions and look up index cards and Dewey Decimal System. So when you go on these trips and you learn this background, to Rashi, to Tosfos, to the Rishonim, how do you do this research? How are you doing that prepared? The fascination that you have, and you only went on the computer for the first time at 30 years old. So where is this research coming from? How do you even know how to do it?
Okay, so I think that in today's day and age, a very important element of the Rabbanos, and that I think both of you have been very successful at, is that you need to bring a sense of professionalism to the Rabbanos. You have people who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are academics, and they've spent many, many years not just studying, but studying in a professional way. So why should Torah be treated any less? And I think for all shiurim and for all topics, you need to bring a sense of professionalism, which means researching and exploring the topic in every and any possible way that will enhance the understanding of the topic. So, when it comes to the trips, you have to go out and buy books and buy svarim about the subjects and personalities you're going to visit. And you have to do your due diligence. You have to put in the time, and you have to collect the information and condense it and be able to pick out the things that are meaningful and that will resonate with people.
That's actually, I find, sometimes even more of the work, meaning when you research a subject, now you have 20 hours that you want to say, but you only have an hour for that particular thing. So how do you, it's the discipline to hold back, to mitzamtzem yourself within it. It's sometimes harder than the actual research.
Yeah, it is.
Are there go-to people that you turn to? You say, I'm going to this place. Could you tell me what are the go-to Sfarim books? What do I download? Who are the experts in Jewish history? Shnei Olamim, you mentioned. Did you ever turn to him and say?
Rabbi Olbaum gave me, let's say, a mahalach. So let's say I would see, he would talk about a certain personality. So where did he glean his information? So you have the Sefer Shem HaGdolim of the Chida. You have there's a Sefer Melitze Yosher that gives brief biographical information of all the Gdolim. You have these Svarim now, Zechroinim Levracha, that a listing of all the yard sites of all the Gdolim who ever lived. You have a set of Svarim called Gedolei HaDoros that's out of print from Rabbi Chil Michal Stern that has biographical information. You have Rabbi Wine's books. I made it my business to make a relationship with Rabbi Wine over the last couple of years, who was a tremendous resource, surprisingly not just of history, but of common sense in general about the Rabbanos. Yeah, so I appreciated.
Now, for our listeners, notice that Rabbi Glatstein did not list Wikipedia on his.
Google
I do
AI.
use it, but I didn't mention it.
No. But you're going right to the primary sources, which is also part of the foundation that you had from Yeshiva. Again,
I mean,
primary sources, not trusting or relying only on.
No, I'll tell you a funny story. Recently, so one of the Svarim that published recently was a translation, annotation of the Chavetz Chaim's Tzipis Yeshua. Okay,
in our office.
So that's a sefer everybody's heard of. And I grew up hearing about it, so I had this chus to put it out for Art Scroll. But before putting it out, I said, you know what? I'm putting out a sefer. I need to write something about the history of Tzipis Yeshua. So I started doing research. When did Chavetz Chaim write this? What were the conditions that he wrote it? And I searched. There is no Tzipis Yeshua. It's in the back of Kol Kisvei Chavetz Chaim, appendage to like 19 other countries. And when did he write it? And so I'm researching on Oitzer HaChachma. It says that the Chavetz Chaim's son-in-law published it for the first time in the 1920s, and he writes on the title page, published for the first time for Klal Yisrael in 1929. Why published? And then he says, because the Chavetz Chaim couldn't publish in his lifetime because of censorship. And he first published it in a newspaper called Hapelas. So it says censorship. I started researching the censorship of the Chavetz Chaim's works and how he had to encounter the early maskilim. And the maskilim gave him heartache about different things in Sefer Chavetz Chaim that he had to publish. So I'm searching now. A newspaper is called Hapelas. It's not in there. So I contacted the National Library of Israel. Now, I don't know if a typical yeshiva bacher would know to do that, but I contacted them. And the librarian came, he said, it's not in Hapelas, but they discovered that the editor of Hapelas was somebody named Rabbi Rabinowitz, who was a rabbi in Paltava. Hapelas went out of business, and then for 5 years he published a newspaper called Hamodia for 5 years, which obviously is a predecessor of the current Hamodia. And as a supplement in Hamodia, the Chavetz Chaim stuck in, like
Indian magazine.
Yeah, Indian magazine.
Hamodia, right.
Yeah, and Yated has these magazines. He stuck in this magazine, Tzipis Yeshua.
Yeah.
So I got to the bottom of it.
And that's the whole introduction to
the introduction to Tzipis Yeshua. But I'm very proud that I put that into I think it adds to the Sefer. And then an understanding, what was the issue with Tzipis Yeshua that the censors had a problem with it. And clearly, the concept of Jewish redemption bothered the secular Jewish censors, because one time when the Chavetz Chaim was brought Sefer Chavetz Chaim to be edited, to be censored, the censor was the son-in-law of the father of the Maskilim. I think his name was Joshua Steinberg. Steinberg was looking at this and he saw the Chavetz Chaim wrote, Oived koichavim umazalois lahavdil. Lahavdil. And Steinberg said, how could you say lahavdil? There's no difference, universal mankind. And so you can imagine, if the word lahavdil was a problem to Steinberg, then certainly the concept of Jewish redemption would be a problem. But that's fascinating that the Chavetz Chaim could not publish the Sefer Tzipis Yeshua in his time.
How do you write? Do you dedicate time every day, every week? Do you have certain goals? How many words? How many pages?
No.
Is it
is it
early in the morning, late at night? I'm hoping that in these conversations, one day someone will break through and I'll actually write. I have a lot of books written, but they're just all in my head.
Tarsha Balpeh.
Yeah, as of now.
Sometimes I say, okay, I have to get this out, and then I, so to speak, closet myself up for some time and just spend time.
Ad kedei kach you'll cancel shiurim and other things.
No,
and
I won't
just
cancel shiurim, but
you won't be available for meetings, phone call. I got to bang this out. I've got to knock this out.
To some extent, I'll really focus on it.
But otherwise, it's just steal a few minutes here and a few minutes there, and it's not loud.
Yeah, but it's really.
Does Art Scroll give you deadlines? Are there deadlines?
It's all self-imposed.
It's all self-imposed. There's no deadlines. I'll speak to Zlotowitz. Get him to give you some deadlines. That's good. That's good. How often are you traveling for Shabbos like this one?
For Shabbos? A couple times a year.
Oh, not often?
I don't know.
Not often.
5 times a year.
Okay. Well, Florida, hopefully now in November, it's gorgeous weather.
Winter,
the children are here. Some children are here. So, Baruch Hashem, it's a good excuse. A good excuse to come. Where's a place you haven't been yet that you still want to go? I don't mean on the speaking tour, but I mean the travels and...
Let's say of Jewish historical interest? Well, we were going to do a trip, but then October 7th happened. So that would have been epic. We're going to go to Petra, the kever of Aaron HaKohen. So that was one interesting spot. And also there's Nachal Arnon, where the Jewish people crossed into Eretz Yisrael, and you can make a bracha there. But that's not a typical place that's really ancient Jewish history.
Yeah.
And Egypt. You have the kever of the Abir Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Abi Chatzera. But one day. Maybe Syria now will become available.
Yeah, the world is changing every day. It's unbelievable what we find. Your Sfarim and your books and your lectures are almost kol kulo Torah. And what I mean by that, and I don't want to suggest that I'm an expert in them, is it's not commenting on contemporary issues or weighing in on controversies or taking a stand on whatever Jewish people have determined is the crisis. is that intention by design? Meaning, do you think that part of why you resonate and why you have a broad audience is that you just keep it focused on Torah and you're not distracted and don't want to distract others by saying, now I'm going to come out with a strong statement on the shidduch crisis or this crisis or a yeshiva thing or the new mayor of New York, or I'm not weighing in on this, Eretz Yisrael, the army. Like it's Torah. It's Torah, it's character, are you tempted to ever comment or insert yourself and you have to hold back from it?
Maybe in the Svarim, you'll notice that for the most part, I'm not commenting on contemporary issues. That's in the Hebrew Svarim. In the English Svarim, I have touched on them. In the book The Darkness and the Dawn, there's certain things that I wrote about Eretz Yisrael from various opinions that somebody once commented to somebody who gave an approbation, this is and I was able to back it up because it was sourced. But I do comment on contemporary issues in the shiurim. And they do go and many of them are public,
right?
Be it sometimes politics, sometimes Eretz Yisrael, sometimes shidduchim. And
is that always premeditated? You mean to comment on that, or it just happens in the natural flow?
No, I mean to comment on it. But I will sometimes take a very interesting position, where I will say what I feel. But there are certain things. This is how I feel about a certain issue. But if there is if people are not happy with it, then I can reevaluate and say, look, this is not one of my core principles. So what do I need to aggravate people? Now they're not going to listen to my Gemara shiurim. They're not going to listen to my Mishnah Berurah shiurim. They're not going to, is it really worth it? So in other words, let's say, for example, one of my core principles is decorum by davening. That's not negotiable for me. I've lost jobs. I've lost a job for that. Yeah. But I will not bend. I will not budge. I feel that it's responsibility of the leadership of a shul to ensure decorum by davening, talking and use of devices. So that's something I'll stick my neck at. I'll say it. And if you don't like it, jump in a lake. But let's say other things. I once gave the history of early Hasidus. And everything I said came from legitimate sources. Right. This was not theory, what I was saying, okay? And, I got pushed back about it. Said, what do I need that for? What do I need it for? I got to marry for my kids. I got to, it's not one of my core principles.
So did you take the shiur down?
I took it down.
Oh, you took it down.
I took
what
it
do
down.
I need out there?
What do I need? Yeah.
How many shiurim have you taken down over the years?
I don't know.
Does it happen frequently?
No, it doesn't happen frequently. But, I think if it's not your core principle, then, you're doing yourself an...
Which hills to die on.
Yeah.
Right. Choosing the hills to die on. I want to follow up on the decorum, and I know we're winding down because time is valuable and Shabbos is coming. I agree. We agree, obviously, both in our own personal conduct and the way that we're trying to grow and build our shul. But what do you say to the people who say, look, it's a different generation, it's a different time. And if somebody who struggles, who doesn't have the attention, the discipline to be able to make it through, who every now and then, and finds the parts in davening where it's not as egregious, meaning because there are people who are like from the beginning to the end, in a Beis Knesset Bichlal, you can never talk. And others who know a little bit, no, you can't talk between this and this, but here, like a little bit, I need to. I can't take a tiny deep or that long. It's a form of torture. And if you're going to crack down, you're going to create such a focus on decorum, I'm going to be turned off. I'm going to stay home. I'm not going to daven. Meaning, where we put the bar is complicated. And in our own shul, which has 8 minyanim on Shabbos morning, there's 1 minyan in particular where they make very concerted announcement and they put down their foot and it's not tolerated, and you'll be called out if you do talk. You'll be asked to go outside and have your conversation.
The Rabbanim if they're...
Yeah, and in other places, meaning we give a drasha and there on our way out, somebody says like Yashikoach and like we're all getting Mussar. No, Ad Kedei Kach. Ad Kedei Kach, and that's okay because that's the standard. That's the sort of agreed on. And other minyanim, there's more flexibility because it's understood that's a minyan where people might come a little bit later, might talk a little bit more, and a person who's still finding their way. So if there is this emphasis or focus, is there a concern? We had minyanim all the time, and people approached us about a minyan for a particular demographic group who wanted a minyan, let's say that'd be a weekday minyan that'd be under 20 minutes. You absolutely fly. Everything is super quick. Everything is super... And we put our foot down and we said, even though we have the daily plag men chamarav now, halachically complicated, but lamaisa, People are looking for it. We have minyanim that Zman Kriya Shema, Zman Tefillah, complicated, we allow it. But a minyan that categorically goes against what we think is dignified tefillah, we can't host. And even if it means that those people won't daven with a minyan because they need it to be 18 minutes, it's got to be a matzah minyan, maybe they could find it somewhere else. If not, they won't find it with us. But when it comes to decorum, is there that concern that the overemphasis and the absolute intolerance for a person anywhere, anytime could leave people just not coming to shul because they also crave a social component to it, and they're looking something different, not only the davening or not connected to the davening. Where do you find that balance?
So I don't have a balance with that. I'll tell you straight up. I know people have a social need, and I don't think that davening is a time to fulfill that social need. Are there times in davening where there are certain loopholes or leniencies? Well, once you start Baruch Shamar until after Shemona Esrei, no, between Melechei Ha'olamim and Baruch Atah Hashem, you're allowed to talk L'Dvar Mitzvah. But you can't,
right?
There are no other exceptions. So are you allowed to talk Ben Gavra L'Gavra? The Mishnah Berurah says no, the Aruch HaShulchan says yes. No. So I could understand, you're not going to crack down Ben Gavra L'Gavra. But I think if somebody says, look, Rabbi, I have a need to have a social outlet, or I cannot remain silent for 2.5 hours, 2 hours straight, I think you could have a candid discussion. Say, look, this is our opportunity. We come to Shul to recognize the Creator of the world. I understand you personally have a hard time remaining silent throughout. So take a break. Take a break. In the sanctuary is not a place for socialization.
Now, do you have that luxury because of where you are? In other words,
I have
in a shul that has so much diversity and so many different types of people coming into a room is a little bit different than when you're in a shul where, okay, if you don't like this, you can go next door, you can go down the block. There are like 40 other shuls for you. My shul has this standard, and you're okay setting that standard. And if you don't like it,
right,
go
if
to
you lived
another
out of town, you were the only shul in town.
But if you're a community shul where your whole mission is to bring people in and to be makarev people, and if they're not coming here, they're not going anywhere else. So does that change the conversation a little?
Meaning the guy who's on the journey towards Yiddishkeit, or who was on the journey away from Yiddishkeit. So Davening starts at 9, he comes in at 10. A few people near him give him a Shalom Aleichem before he opens up his siddur. But if everyone's going to give a Shah and go, and you can't, and how could you? Forget it, I'm not coming.
He's not going to the shul next door. He's just going to check out.
We're not here to defend talking.
I understand you completely. I think there are two different demographics. If you have a Kiruv shul of somebody who's not educated in Torah, so then I think those people are 100% receptive to the importance of proper decorum by davening. I've never encountered any. I think it's the opposite demographic, which I have. I'm in New York, so I know exactly this demographic. I know this demographic better than anybody. Okay, I went to Flatbush, Brooklyn Yeshivas, where you either go to the 5 towns or you go to Lakewood. Okay, and I'm a rabbi in the 5 towns, which means that this is the exact demographic that we're dealing with. We're talking about people who learned in yeshivas, and then for whatever reason, call it chip on the shoulder or something like that, they're trying to figure out their way back. I personally am not familiar with the approach of, I haven't seen that ultimately by bringing them back in and allowing the kiddush and the talking that they'll ultimately come back to, call genuine observance. I haven't seen it, Maybe there are people who specialize in that type of rabbanos, and they have the exact formula. I'm not familiar with it. I don't know it. My approach is that, these are the house rules. I'm in a place where on every single corner there's a shul. You want to come to my shul? This is... Right.
And that's fair. That works there. And I would want to go to your shul. I want to go to your shul. But it's an interesting, complex question that people have to grapple with. Rabbi Glatstein, thank you for being here. We're so excited you made time for this among all of the shiurim and all that you're doing. And may not be your comfort zone as a shy person. And we didn't let you prepare because we didn't really give questions in advance. But that's when you're best, without the preparation, at least for these topics. Yeah. So thank you for making the time, inspiring Klal Yisrael, and inspiring us.
You should have a lot of hatzlacha and continuing to elevate this as a center, not only for Florida, but really for all of Klal Yisrael.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Bima. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week for another peek behind the Bima.